The film begins with a story about a guy named Yoon-ho who is really nice, but sometimes nice guys don't get the appreciation they deserve from girls. This is what happens to Yoon-ho. At that time, he tries really hard to be there for his girlfriend, but she ends up falling for someone else. This all begins when Yoon-ho comes back to Korea with his girlfriend, Chung-young. They both want to start careers in music. When they get to Korea, they meet up with Joon Young, who is Yoon-ho's best friend. But Yoon-ho doesn't know that Joon Young and Chung-young have feelings for each other that they've kept hidden. Now, after a long time apart, Chung-young sees Joon Young again and remembers all the old feelings she had for him. Back when Joon Young went to America to show off his piano skills, Chung-young was there too. She was so charmed by him that she kissed him, even though she was still with Yoon-ho and they were planning to get married. On the other hand, Yoon-ho was thrilled to see his best friend Joon Young again. They talked all night long, just like brothers do. During their chat, Yoon-ho mentioned he hoped Joon Young would join his music team. Everything seemed fine until the topic switched to Chung-young. Joon Young's expression suddenly changed because he was hiding a big secret about her. Meanwhile, Chung-young was always thinking about Joon Young. To her, it was as if Yoon-ho didn't really matter because Joon Young was the one she truly liked from the start. The next day, as Yoon-ho was helping Chung-young get ready, he brought up his conversation from the night before with Joon Young. Joon Young had claimed that he didn't meet Chung-young on his last trip to America for a music event. Curious, Chung-young asked if Joon Young really said she wasn't there. This confused Yoon-ho, and he started wondering about what had actually happened. And Yoon-ho, without any suspicion, asked Chung-young again if she really had been in America. She quickly said no and lied that she hadn't been there. She almost let it slip how upset Yoon-ho would be if he found out that she and Joon Young had kissed each other during that trip. Soon after, Chung-young secretly met with Joon Young to talk about their feelings. However, thinking about Yoon-ho made her cautious because she still felt guilty. Unfortunately, the way she spoke led Joon Young to misunderstand her, making him feel let down, and he left her abruptly. Turns out, a woman named Song-ah saw this happen. At that time, Song-ah plays in an orchestra and was once helped by Joon Young. She dreams of becoming successful in music, but despite working hard day and night, she struggled to catch up. Song-ah tried many times to get into a music school, but kept getting rejected. Finally, she got into one. At this school, Song-ah was the oldest student, which made her stand out. The other, younger students often made fun of her or teased her because they thought she wasn't very good. However, Song-ah never let their words bother her, choosing instead to keep her feelings to herself. When she felt sad, she would spend time alone to think. During a really tough time in her life, Song-ah met Joon Young. She was at a rehearsal for an orchestra performance, and even though she was participating, she sat in the back. In an orchestra, where you sit often shows how skilled you are, and unfortunately, Song-ah was considered the least skilled. At that time, Joon Young arrived late to the rehearsal but still got a warm welcome from the conductor and even praise for his piano skills. Meanwhile, the conductor was not happy with the way Song-ah's violin sounded and told her it was ruining the performance. This was Song-ah's first time performing, and she quietly asked the conductor to give her another chance. Instead of understanding, the conductor scolded her harshly. Song-ah felt so upset and embarrassed as everyone watched her struggle to hold back tears. Seeing how sad she was, Joon Young cleverly dropped his book to distract everyone and ease the tension. The conductor stopped being angry, but Song-ah still had to leave. Soon after, one of Song-ah's friends came to congratulate her, not knowing that Song-ah wasn't going to perform. As they talked, Joon Young overheard and decided to step in. He complimented Song-ah right there in front of her friend, showing his support so she wouldn't feel like giving up. Her friend was really impressed that a famous pianist like Joon Young praised Song-ah. From that point on, Song-ah and Joon Young kept running into each other by chance. Joon Young is a quiet guy, and Song-ah is a shy girl. Whenever they met, things were always a bit awkward between them. Song-ah had faced many failures, and her family, tired of seeing her struggle, suggested she just find a regular job instead of chasing her dreams. As time went on, Song-ah got an internship at a cultural foundation managed by Chung-young's family company. This job brought her into contact with Joon Young, Chung-young, and Yoon-ho. Her boss, Young-in, assigned her to work closely with these three, which helped them start to get to know each other better. One evening, they all went out to dinner together. At dinner, Yoon-ho was chatty and seemed cheerful, unaware that Joon Young and Chung-young were feeling awkward because of their hidden feelings for each other. Ironically, even though Yoon-ho appeared to be the happiest, he was actually the saddest. After they ate, Yoon-ho asked Joon Young to play a song on the piano. He turned to Song-ah for a song suggestion, and she recommended Tremiri Eye. Soon after, Joon Young went quiet when he heard this because Tremiri Eye was a special song for him and Chung-young. Despite his hesitation, Yoon-ho insisted, and Joon Young ended up playing the song. When Chung-young heard the song Tremiri Eye being played, she was deeply moved. Her eyes were fixed only on Joon Young, and she didn't even think about Yoon-ho, who was right next to her. The song brought back a flood of memories she shared with Joon Young. Even after they left, Chung-young couldn't stop thinking about him. Meanwhile, Joon Young had to take care of Yoon-ho, who had gotten drunk. As they headed to Yoon-ho's house, Yoon-ho kept talking in his tipsy state about how much he loved Chung-young. This made her feel guilty and sad. He cared a lot about Chung-young, but he also didn't want to hurt his best friend, Yoon-ho. The next day, Chung-young tricked Joon Young into going to a music concert with her. She told him that Yoon-ho would be playing there, thinking Joon Young wouldn't want to miss it. At the concert, things didn't go as Chung-young planned because Song-ah was there too. Joon Young ended up paying more attention to Song-ah than to Chung-young. After the concert, they all went out to eat together. While they were eating, a song played in the background, and Song-ah mentioned how much she liked the song. Yoon-ho joked that of course all violinists would like it. Then, he asked Joon Young for his thoughts, since Joon Young is a violinist too. There, Joon Young shared that he liked the song not just for its music, but because there was a special story behind it. The story of the song was actually about the love between Chung-young and Joon Young, something Yoon-ho didn't know. At that time, Joon Young didn't say much more because he didn't want to upset Yoon-ho. The next day, Yoon-ho met up with Young-in just to chat. During their conversation, Young-in mentioned that Chung-young had gone to see Joon Young perform in America. This news made Yoon-ho start to suspect that Chung-young and Joon Young were keeping secrets from him. He spent the whole night feeling worried and suspicious about what might be going on. Because Chung-young was going to practice music with Joon Young, she didn't want Joon Young to see her wearing a wedding ring. So, she took it off before starting their session. When they were about to begin, Yoon-ho noticed that Chung-young wasn't wearing the ring he had given her. It became clear to him that there was something special going on between Chung-young and Joon Young, which really disappointed him. Everyone was mixed up because of their feelings, and sensing trouble, Joon Young quickly left the scene. Sadly, right after Joon Young left, Chung-young ran after him, leaving Yoon-ho all by himself, looking very upset. However, Yoon-ho tried to stay strong. He even walked Chung-young to the front to get a taxi. In the evening, Yoon-ho went to Joon Young's house and invited him to have a drink together. Yoon-ho ended up drinking a lot and got pretty drunk. Suddenly, he told Joon Young to just leave. Joon Young initially thought Yoon-ho was joking, but when he saw Yoon-ho's serious expression, he realized it was no joke. Knowing that Yoon-ho was heartbroken, Joon Young decided it was time to firmly end his past relationship with Chung-young. After talking to her, Joon Young left for good. Meanwhile, Yoon-ho, heartbroken, continued to look at his wedding ring, feeling sad. On the other hand, Chung-young, who had been caught, couldn't hide the truth anymore. She and Yoon-ho ended up having a private talk. They usually laugh together, but this time it was very awkward. Then, Yoon-ho started the conversation, trying to hold back tears, and his body shook from the effort. Chung-young felt sad and guilty for hurting Yoon-ho, but she couldn't deny her true feelings. At that time, Yoon-ho told Chung-young that she could take some time away if she needed it, but he begged her not to leave him forever. Hearing this, Chung-young started crying and ultimately ended their relationship by saying she was sorry. Now, Yoon-ho was left alone. Soon after, Chung-young went home and told her grandmother about what had happened. Chung-young and her grandmother didn't have the best relationship because her grandmother always pressured her to take care of the family business. When her grandmother heard the story, she said Chung-young made the right decision and even insulted Yoon-ho by calling him poor and looking down on him. Strangely, Chung-young felt hurt when her grandmother insulted Yoon-ho, and this made her angry with her grandmother. Meanwhile, Joon Young, who kept meeting Song-ah, ended up falling for her. He admired how Song-ah stayed positive even when others put her down, and Song-ah noticed that Joon Young was always quietly supporting her. When Chung-young learned about Joon Young's feelings for Song-ah, she felt heartbroken because her feelings for Joon Young were not returned. She tried to win him back, but it only led to more heartache. Then, Joon Young eventually told Chung-young that it was time for her to move on and reevaluate her feelings. He pointed out that she seemed happy when she was with Yoon-ho, but now she was alone. This made Chung-young start to miss Yoon-ho. While she was alone and thinking things over, Chung-young heard the news that Yoon-ho was moving abroad. As she touched her cheek, Chung-young remembered how Yoon-ho used to warm her hands and say that her hands were only cold when her heart was sad. Realizing she was indeed sad about Yoon-ho leaving, Chung-young felt a deep sorrow. Her sadness grew even more when she unexpectedly learned that her grandmother had passed away. All these bad things happening one after another left Chung-young feeling very down. At Chung-young's grandmother's funeral, both Yoon-ho and Joon Young came to show their respects. They were there to support Chung-young, and Yoon-ho even warmed her hands one last time, just like he used to. Besides attending the funeral, Yoon-ho also showed up for the anniversary of her grandmother's death, where he performed alongside Chung-young, Joon Young, and Song-ah. After their performance, Yoon-ho returned a music book that Chung-young had lent him. This made Chung-young very sad because it meant they didn't have any more reasons to see each other. Yoon-ho then said goodbye and walked away. In a sudden rush of emotion, Chung-young ran after Yoon-ho and asked him when he would be coming back. Yoon-ho replied that he didn't know, hinting that he might not return. Hearing this, Chung-young felt really upset and cried as she watched Yoon-ho leave. After the funeral, Chung-young found herself living alone and decided to become a music teacher. She spent a lot of time thinking about her past mistakes and learning from them. One day, while she was getting ready to play the violin in the music room, there was a knock at the door. To her surprise, it was Yoon-ho. He greeted her with a simple hello, and at first, Chung-young was so shocked she couldn't believe it was really him standing there. Soon, she came to her senses and greeted him back. At that time, Yoon-ho had decided to come back, and he chose to forgive Chung-young for everything that had happened. Now, they are ready to start their story anew. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if life gives you cold hands, make sure you've got a hand warmer or a forgiving ex nearby.